The 49ers reversed a major problem this offseason, and in this episode, I've got 4 different clips from well-respected names in football that will bring each of you a little bit of a smile and a little bit of pride as I record on this insanely rainy, stormy day over here in Denver, Colorado. But hit subscribe for daily 49ers content, and today's episode is a good candidate for your listening ears. So if you're looking for a podcast version of this episode, check out On the Daily, a 49ers podcast on Apple or Spotify. But let's get straight into it. The San Francisco 49ers, as you know, brought in Robert Saleh. Here's George Kittle and his take on the importance of bringing Robert Saleh back to the 49ers. Listen carefully to what he says and how he phrases it. Pretty interesting.
That might be like the underlying headline for the Niners, is that Saleh's back in the building. He's really good at his job, and I'm really excited that we somehow convinced him to be our defensive coordinator again, because he knows what he's talking about. He's inspiring. He gets the boys fired up, and he just happens to also be really, really smart. So I'm pumped to have him back in the building, just hanging out with him a little bit, talking about stuff. You can just tell he's ready to roll this year, and he's going to get the boys fired up.
All gas, no brakes, right? That's what he does.
Yeah.
You know?
That is.
That's
yep.
Him.
Violence is coming, is what I would say.
Okay. That sounds very Game of Thrones-ish.
So, start with the opening phrase that Kittle uses to describe Robert Saleh's return being the underlying headline of the 49ers offseason. I love that phrase, the underlying headline, because it's this undertone, this thing that happened that has underscored everything that's happened. The 49ers drafting 5 defensive players as their first 5 out of 11 total draft. They drafted more defensive players than the Minnesota Vikings had draft picks. In the first 5 picks, they already overdid what the Minnesota Vikings had the entire draft. I mean, that's crazy, right? The 49ers have this underscore, this underlying headline of Robert Saleh. I love that phrasing. And we are focused on a lot of other things, understandably. In the offseason, you talk about players the most. But in terms of the biggest impact that the 49ers are going to get this offseason, it has to be Robert Saleh, right? Or it's at least close to Robert Saleh. Maybe Michael Williams or C.J. West or Nick Martin or Upton Stout. One of these guys, Alfred Collins, goes off, and they're so incredible that you'd be like, that was the biggest move the 49ers could have possibly made. But Robert Saleh absolutely is the glue that brings everything together. So I love that. Another phrase he used is, we somehow convinced him to be our defensive coordinator again. That's a great way to describe the value that George Kittle sees in a guy like Robert Saleh, and the value that the NFL sees in a guy like Robert Saleh, who would have had his shot at other coaching opportunities. He had 2, maybe Tennessee Titans. That might have been one of them off the top of my head. But anyway, the 49ers are able to get him in the building, keep him around, and hopefully that goes for a couple years, not just one. I think if everything goes the way we hope it will, he's going to have plenty of other opportunities, and he might even choose to wait until he gets the right opportunity, a solid, really good opportunity, not just take whatever head coaching job comes available, like the New York Jets. That was not exactly. Anyway, all gas, no brakes. Violence is coming. Obviously, speed and violence, 49ers values, let's call them, really important for 49ers defense, and I would like to see the 49ers defense lead the way this season. Doesn't mean that the offense isn't going to be good. Still plenty there. We'll even talk about some of that later today in this episode, but most definitely would like to see the defense helping lead the way on this team, and maybe be that team, be that position group that keeps them in games at times. It felt like the 49ers had so many games where the defense, we just needed the defense to get a stop. We just needed the defense to keep us in the game, and they couldn't do it so often. So there's a big one there. George Kittle also talked about Brock Purdy. This one probably won't surprise you. This sounds a little bit like what George Kittle has said about Brock Purdy in the past, but he did throw in a little extra something in there, so give this a listen.
You're right.
Is he worth it, George? You're going to hear that.
I am. I've heard it multiple times already. I would say, I don't know what his winning percentage is, but when you win a lot of games and then the only, 2 years you go to NFC Championship or better, I think that's decent. And one of my favorite things about Purdy is everyone calls him the checkdown merchant. And then the last 2 years, he's had the least amount of checkdowns in the NFL as a starting quarterback. So I think he's doing pretty well.
So checkdown merchant, is that?
So you got to give him a little bit of credit, of course, for the things that Brock Purdy has done. And 49ers fans most of the time do pretty well in at least recognizing the good things that Brock Purdy has done. It is also funny that there's still a narrative out there around check down merchant, check down king, that kind of stuff. I'm amazed that anybody even says that anymore, considering it is factually incorrect that Brock Purdy has the second worst in 2024, had the second worst check down percentage out of any quarterback in the NFL. So only one guy was lower than him in check down percentage. And that's not good. That's a bad stat in my opinion. Sure, you could say a team that does really well without check downs, you might say, hey, look how good that quarterback is. They didn't even have to use check downs, I guess. But I wouldn't really care about that because as far as I'm concerned, you need to be taking advantage of opportunities when they're given to you. And the only way to keep defenses honest is to do all of those things. You put them at the numbers, put them in a deep ball, take advantage of your checkdowns. Keep the defense honest in every way possible. Run the ball, run pass option, screen plays. Like, we need to see a larger variety than we saw last season. And I feel like that will be a huge impact just in having Christian McCaffrey back by itself. That will have that benefit, I think, in having more checkdowns, taking more opportunities. So you're not trying to force the ball all the time. That was an issue for the 49ers this last season, toward the end of the season, where it felt like, Brock Purdy is stretching to make plays, not just with his feet, but throwing deep balls that were unnecessary. And we don't want to see that. We need Brock Purdy to play his game the way he's supposed to play it, execute Shanahan's offense, and not try to go too crazy with any of those things that he himself says he's not the best at. So it would be wise for the 49ers to take advantage of all of those opportunities. Now, one more thing Kittle said, and then we're going to get to Keyshawn Johnson, who just said something pretty awesome as well. But Rich Eisen did ask George Kittle. I don't know if I ever said this was on Rich Eisen's show. I hope you kind of figured that out. But anyway, this is on Rich Eisen's show. Rich Eisen did ask George Kittle about the offseason drama. And here's how George Kittle responded.
You're signed, Warner's signed, McCaffrey's healthy. Aiyuk's coming back, at some point. Purdy's paid. I don't even know what the hell to ask you. What do I ask you? It's like boring.
Let's see.
It's boring in your world. What's happening?
Yeah.
Last year it was all like, who's not there? Who's there? You going to get signed? Purdy going to get signed? I'm bored. No offense.
I know. I'm so sorry that the 49ers aren't the centerpiece of some drama this year for the NFL media to talk about.
Yeah.
And, the discourse, we're just not doing our jobs of being dramatic enough. Yeah. I'm so sorry for making you have to work a little bit harder and not just to be able to have clickbait and headlines just right out of the locker room. I'm so sorry. I apologize for that. It's actually my first offseason, I think, without some type of quarterback drama.
Yeah.
So... It's been fantastic.
For those of you that cannot see the video, he just took a nice sigh of relief without all of the drama. And I feel the same way, and I'm sure you do too. We're all feeling the people's tight end on that one. A huge relief to not have a bunch of off-season drama. I don't think we need to elaborate on that point any further. We've beat that drum many times. However, I never changed to the background on that one. Sorry about that. However, Keyshawn Johnson had something to say about the offseason movement as well, kind of in a similar vein of how the 49ers have approached the offseason. Here's Keyshawn Johnson talking about the 49ers being able to maintain a winning culture after losing so many players to free agency. Give him a listen.
Yeah, everybody for the most part from a leadership standpoint is in place, and Paul mentioned it. In terms of the guy that they may miss the most is probably just a Deebo. Yeah. Deebo Samuel, because
who had kind of fallen off last year, right?
Yeah, but because he helped build a little bit of culture that they have. Yeah. Although John Lynch is there and Shanahan, who are the architects of that culture, right? Because they know who belongs in the locker room, who doesn't belong in the locker room, but you still got Christian McCaffrey.
I'm going to pause on the still got part, and we'll come back to that. As he's talking about the culture, I actually think you could make the argument Deebo Samuel was negative to the culture toward the end of the season. Now, I don't think overall that Deebo Samuel was a negative impact on the culture. I wouldn't say, if we're trying to add all the positives and the negatives together, I think it's a net benefit having Deebo Samuel in the locker room. But I do understand the argument that some have made, many in the comment section. I've seen it on social media as well. Folks who feel like Deebo Samuel kind of really erupting on the sideline as a leader, going and hitting Tabor Pepper and, going off on Jake Moody for missing a kick and some of that kind of stuff. Everybody has their own specific way of being motivated properly. And Deebo lost his cool. And I think you can write it off as like, hey, this is football. Like, grow some or whatever. Like, if you want to go that route, that's fine. I don't think that situation was handled in a way that was best for Jake or best for Tabor or best for Deebo or best for the team. It was an eruption of some internal stuff that was going on. And then you can also talk about a lot of people being really upset about Deebo and Trent coming out with the boombox and kind of some of that kind of culture that carried over from 2023. That was like, man, you have to re-earn that. Every single year you have to earn the right to have that kind of swagger, that kind of intentional attitude coming onto the field. It's like that famous, I think it was Ohio State, that came out like they were all dogs on leashes and they were holding the dogs back and then they got absolutely destroyed. I don't know if you remember that game, but if I could be wrong about the team, I think it was Ohio State. And, it's kind of one of those things where it's like, you have to earn the right to go and act like that, to have that kind of an attitude stepping on the field. Fred Warner, he will tell you all the time, he'll always say best in the world, right? You can say that, but you have to back it up. And I think there's a difference between swagger, yes, I am the best, and what I think Fred Warner's doing is more setting the tone. We are the best. We have to be the best. Like, it's a tone setter. I think it's a little bit different. That's just my personal take. Let's talk about the players that are here, though, and let Keyshawn Johnson go ahead and continue on this incredible reign.
Still got Aiyuk. You still got Fred Warner. You still got Brock Purdy and Kittle and Trent Williams. So you still got Bosa and company. They still there. And I love when people say that the losses for the 49ers.
Listen to this.
The real loss is Deebo Samuel. Yeah. Because when you look at the other players like Elijah Mitchell and Jalen Moore and Aaron Banks, they're guys. Yeah. But they're not the frontline guys, right? Ufanga was a frontline guy, but often injured, right? Greenlaw was a frontline guy, but often injured. Yeah. They had planned on moving on from them, okay? So even when you look at Leonard Floyd was not an original San Francisco 49er as part of that culture. He was basically, as you like to say, Paul, a rental for them at the outside linebacker defensive end position that fit for what they wanted to do. But in the end, they decided to move on from him because he didn't give them enough. Right. So they didn't lose the type of pieces that we think. They lost some numbers, but they replaced those numbers in free agency and through the draft. I don't think they're going to fall off at all. I think the coach is still there, and their window for the Super Bowl is still wide open.
Woo! Okay. Thank you, Keyshawn Johnson. I love that take. I'll have it. 49ers fans have been saying that all offseason. I think this is not a new thing for us, but it's nice to hear it on a national stage, Fox Sports. But they still have the leadership. They still have the talent. Trent, CMC, Purdy, Kittle, Warner, Aiyuk, Bosa. Yeah, and then you could even throw out guys like Diamond Lenore that continues to go under the radar. Never one of those listed players because he got snubbed on the All-Pro thing. Third and Juwan, who basically turned into third and anytime Juwan, we could call him this last year. The guys that we lost, though, this is the part that I thought was really key. The guys that we lost, most of which were either injured, their best football was already behind them, or they were team players, not frontliners. And that's where the title of this episode comes full circle. The 49ers had a major problem, quote unquote, during free agency. Everybody was freaking out in the first week of free agency. What have you done, 49ers? What are you doing? You have let a record number of cash get spent by other teams on your players. And you bring in Luke Farrell, some special teams guys. Keyshawn Johnson is dead right. The 49ers played this very, very well. You can argue Deebo if you want, like he tried to, but there's a counter argument there with his form last year. You can argue Dre Greenlaw or Talanoa Hufanga, but there's a counter argument there as well with being able to stay healthy. So when I look at all of these guys that have left and I look at the players that they've brought in, it's clear the 49ers were making a massive shift in what they were expecting out of their defensive line, mainly in the ability to stop the run. and they were making a huge shift in letting some of these guys go who either couldn't stay healthy or their form had taken, for Deebo, kind of a 2-year downturn. I'll give more credit than most people will for 2023. A lot of people will say, ever since he got signed, it's been downhill for Deebo. I don't totally agree with that. I still think 2023, even though the stats maybe aren't as prominent in 2023, he still fulfilled a very important role and had several games. That was such a Deebo thing, by the way, to just have a couple games a year where you felt like Deebo just won that game, right? And you look at the 3-game spell where the 49ers are losing in 2023, that's when Deebo Samuel's injured. Trent Williams was also injured, to be fair, but whatever. The point I think is made. Deebo Samuel was a good player. I don't know that last year was a perfect indication of what his capabilities are still in this league, despite the lead boots he seems to be wearing on the football field with the Washington Commanders mandatory minicamp. But whatever. Put all that aside, okay? I think Deebo Samuel's still a decent player. But I agree that his best football is behind him. I don't think he's ever going to have that 2021 level season. And, I think all of those players, you could make a similar argument. I would have liked to see Dre Greenlaw stay with the 49ers. I think he could have been really, really important for the 49ers coming up this year. But there is a concern about his injury, and I get that. There's a genuine concern there. And if he doesn't ever come back and play 100% football again, the 49ers will feel like they made the right move. Well, I guess the 49ers can't really get credit for not keeping Dre Greenlaw. He didn't want to be here. But, the 49ers won't feel too bad about him going to the Denver Broncos. So we'll have to wait and see, of course. It's going to be a nice, long stretch here of 37 days until training camp. But there's still so much coming out, so much media. I've got to get to some stuff that John Lynch said. Maybe tomorrow we'll get onto some of that stuff. There's still so much to break down from the previous weeks, but also even in these recent days. So stick around, stay subscribed so you don't miss out on all of the action. Appreciate all of you guys and hope you guys are having a less rainy day than I am. A fantastic day. And I'm sure most of you are enjoying watching those San Francisco Giants as well. Have a good one. Appreciate you.